Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connarton. As you can see, the prodigal son has returned. The Honorable Gary S. Hopper with a little bit of a sunburn, I think. Are you burnt?
What do you mean am I burnt? That's really none of your business.
Yeah, man. Are you burnt?
Yeah, man. Yeah. No, I was out my motorcycle flat because it's been
I know.
super nice or wicked nice.
Perfect weather for it, huh?
I went out to Ohio and I had to stop using the word wicked because I don't think they get it.
Yeah, that's definitely a New England thing or a Northeastern thing.
I avoided using that so they didn't beat me up or something.
That's good. You know how those Ohioans are. You start using the language they don't get, they'll give you a whooping.
Yeah. I tried to go to Lake Erie. You know the Ohioans are so stupid. They actually have a monument to
we have viewers
Garfield
in Cleveland.
the cat.
I'm just kidding. We don't really. They do? They have a monument to Garfield the cat?
Or some Garfield guy.
Oh. Oops, I forgot to silence my phone.
Why don't you silence your phone?
It's probably...
Is it anybody important?
Yeah, Gary. It's someone from Ohio, actually, who's very upset with you. I will apologize on your behalf.
Thanks.
Well, I guess I kind of just
I hope
did,
you can do it as insincerely as I would.
Oh, always.
Okay, good. Hey, did you get that picture I put on your Facebook?
I need to,
yeah. You need to do something.
But is there something to play? Because we have no...
No, there's no playage.
Oh, good, okay.
It's just a picture.
Let me pull that.
Apparently, my guest here tonight, Anne-Marie Banfeld, is from Cornerstone Policy. What do you do with Cornerstone Policy Research?
I'm their education liaison.
Education liaison.
Yes, which
liaison is French for something, right?
I don't ask me why.
No, okay.
Liaison.
Just sounds good.
Is that right?
It does sound French. Yes.
Yeah. And anyway, I went up the. It's not exactly correct, but it's moveon.org, but it was moveonsomething.org, I believe. Sent out an email to a lot of the left-wing loonies to show up at Kelly Ayotte's town hall meeting in Tilton yesterday. So, because she supported the Second Amendment and didn't vote for that crappy gun bill, I went up to support her. I brought my grandson up, and I...
Oh, here we go.
Wait, here we go.
I think I found it.
You got it? You got it? Yeah, there it is. Double click on that, baby. Oh, it makes noises, too.
I was too busy apologizing to our viewer in Ohio. I didn't get to silencing my phone. It's not letting me expand it. Why is that?
Because it doesn't like you.
I guess not.
Computer's slow. So anyway, went up there, I was talking...
Hopefully, you want to show the photo? Is that
I kind of want to show the photo.
If we can put that photo up on the screen, unfortunately,
that'd be awesome.
I can't get it to expand to the full screen, but just go ahead and
no, that doesn't...
It's not...
No, it's getting there. It's almost there. Let's see. Up on the TV. Yeah.
It's not letting me...
It's not?
It won't let me expand it?
It doesn't matter. Anyway, so...
Whoa,
here we go.
I got it. Sorry about that, folks.
Technical difficulties on the Rock, Paper, Hand Grenade
I've
show.
expanded the photo, so...
It's pretty cut off.
Oh, is it?
That's all right. Well, just show it anyway.
Yeah,
if you could. Yeah, I guess that's pretty cut off, but whatever. So anyway, there's this...
All right. Thanks anyway.
So there's all these people. There's a couple dozen people went up to protest Kelly Ayotte in her vote against the background check Senate bill.
Yeah.
Right. And so I asked the picture is on my Facebook and it's on Matt's Facebook, but I asked this young lady, I said, she had this thing that says, I will remember the victims, I will remember your vote, or something like that.
Yeah, I will not forget the victims.
I will not forget, okay?
Yeah.
So I asked her, I says, okay, if that's the case, obviously you're talking about Newtown, which she said yes. So I asked her, I says, so if this bill had gone into effect prior to Newtown, what effect would it have had on the outcome in Newtown? What was her first response? I can't remember exactly.
It's more of a generalized.
Yeah, she said it's more of a generalized.
And I guess didn't...
That she stopped, because I interrupted her.
And I said, oh, okay.
So I said, no. Now listen, I repeated the question. What change would that have made to prevent Newtown if we had, all federal background checks? And she said, what was the last comment?
It's more about strengthening the community.
So in other words, she's holding this sign, and it wasn't like a little kid. It wasn't like somebody was there with their parent or something like that I was asking some little, pummeling some little kid with questions. She's got to be in her 20s, and she's got no clue why she's there. She has no clue that whether that passed or didn't pass could not have prevented Newtown. She has no clue that it's an infringement on states' rights because the federal government has regulatory power over federally licensed dealers. If I sell a handgun to Matt, I'm not a federally licensed dealer, and the federal government has no business in it. It is also the case that in New Hampshire, if I sell a gun to Matt, I can do that because I know him. But if I cannot legally sell a handgun at a yard sale, or as they call it, the gun show loophole. There is no gun show loophole for handguns in New Hampshire. I can't walk into a gun show and sell a handgun to a perfect stranger in New Hampshire. And I pointed out to one of the protesters. He says, well, is it enforced? What's that got to do with it? If they make a federal law, will that be enforced?
Right,
I mean, having extra laws that aren't enforced is an irrelevant point to make.
Well, that's a thing, too, and I have a lot of mixed feelings on the gun debate, but I will say this. One of my questions, whenever anyone wants to pass a new law,
hand grenades? No,
can you sell that to me legally?
Yes.
Well, you do know me, so.
Yes.
One of my questions is always, what about the existing laws? Do we have existing laws that are already being enforced or not? Because it seems like, and I guess this is the libertarian in me that comes out sometimes. It seems like we're so over-legislated in this country. We have laws on top of laws on top of laws. And I understand why it happens, because politicians, certainly at the federal level, always need to look like they're doing something.
Right.
Build a resume, build a legislative resume, so
or
we pass more laws.
Or a bridge to nowhere, you could do that.
Right,
yes,
yeah, exactly. So I'm always questioning, well, what about the existing laws? Are the existing laws we have sufficient? And if they seem insufficient, is that only because they're not being enforced?
Kelly Ayotte, and our guest here can correct me if I don't remember what the numbers were, but she actually went into that, is that the under the federal law that we have now, which is the instant background check, if you go into buy a handgun, you have to go through the check. There are many felons that try to buy guns. Mm-hmm. And I forget how many hundreds and hundreds of them actually try to buy guns. And what was there, only like 60 people that were actually charged, and only 13 that were actually prosecuted. I think there's something like that, right? Is those numbers close?
Yeah, they were. She was bringing up the point that you can pass a law, but if you're not going to enforce or if you're not going to prosecute, then what's the purpose of the law?
Well, there's no force behind it.
Right. I mean, I sat there listening, and as a female, I'm kind of looking for ways to expand gun ownership, especially to females. It's one of the tools that kind of puts me on level playing field. When this has nothing to do with education, but when my son, who's now 21, was an infant in a crib, I was home alone with him, and somebody tried to break in. And at that time, we didn't have a gun in the house. And, nobody understands that kind of fear until it happens. And guess what? I called the police, and guess what? They never came. They never showed up.
Really?
Right. So and by the way, I was living in Ohio at the time.
See, hold on.
All right.
I was.
You know what?
I was. But the bottom line
on
is,
your behalf, I rescind that apology.
Yes, I honestly, we learned right then. I learned as a very young mother that my safety and the safety of my child was in my hands. Mm-hmm. My husband was at work. I couldn't even rely upon him. So when I listen to this, my question is, we're driving up the price of guns, we're driving up the price of ammo. How is that going to make it affordable to younger women? I'm looking at it from a different approach. I understand the issues and I understand the concerns, but I also understand what it's like to be a potential victim to something. Luckily they left, and luckily, I think it was the dog bowls that I had sitting outside in the backyard when they saw them. I think maybe they left, but
that's a good idea. Just have dog bowls.
Right.
Well, it worked that time, but who knows if they would have gotten it.
Well,
I was sitting there waiting on the police.
I'm allergic to dogs, but I could have dog bowls.
Yeah.
Yes.
right?
And even a sign that says "Beware of dog."
Beware
even
of
if you don't
dog.
actually have one. Yeah.
Right, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
You're smarter than you look.
Thank you. I think.
Thank you. You think exactly. So you were faced with that. What did when you were in Ohio? Was the next step? Did you end up getting a firearm?
The next day.
Next day, yeah.
The very next day. That's and I will never, I'll never put my children in that kind of position again, or myself. The next day. I mean, I was kind of on the fence about guns. It was kind of like, I was starting to have a family, and I thought, well, maybe I should have one in the house. And, I certainly don't want to force something like that upon people. That's their own decision to make. But I wasn't real comfortable. Boy, I got real comfortable.
Yeah.
I got real comfortable. We bought a safe, and made sure that, we were all safe with one being in the house. So until you've been in that position, especially as a female, and I don't know if a man can truly understand what that's like, but especially for females, with your child, with your baby, I'm a sitting duck. I was a sitting duck.
Yeah.
For these people, because I thought the police came when you called them. I really did. I was
Apparently
naive.
not in Ohio.
Apparently not.
Probably like a Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
I mean,
distracted,
I
yeah.
think it was more of the person who answered the phone. I think there was some
Really?
kind of I think it wasn't so much the police their fault, but yeah. I mean,
Well, it
so
doesn't matter. Like you said, I forget what the statistic is, but it's the. Well, I wish I could remember numbers accurately, but something to the effect of every 911 call, the average response time is at least 10 or 15 minutes. And if somebody's got a crowbar against your door, they're getting in
Right.
the next couple of minutes.
it is the one thing I figured I have a chance. I have a chance because there were a couple of them. There were a couple guys out there because I saw them come to my door through the peephole and I didn't answer the door. And then I saw them kind of leave and then I heard the car come back and I seen them run into my backyard and go towards the back door and things like that. So at that moment, I had time. I had time to get it, load it. I would have had enough time. And it was the one thing that I knew that put me on a level playing field with them. And so I'm really concerned about people that want to pass more laws and more laws and more laws and make it more difficult for people like me, or people who are wealthy enough who can go out and buy these expensive ones because I think they've driven up the price with so much of this regulation. So I'm kind of looking almost at the opposite, like how do we get, when the Boston terrorists were out there and everybody was on lockdown, all I could think about was I'm wondering how many of those people wish that they had a gun in their home.
Oh, yeah.
I would have wanted one that day if I was living in Watertown.
Right.
Just out of curiosity, in Ohio, how easy was it to get one? Was it relatively easy?
That was probably 15 years ago at least. No, more than that. Probably like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty easy back then.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy. They were reasonably priced. But I don't remember all the laws. But
Sure.
you know what? I don't remember any. There was no background checks. I think you could just go buy one.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I don't think there was any, any problems.
Yes,
And-
so far the background checks, according to, based on what Kelly Ayotte said last night, aren't really that effective anyway.
Right.
Because if you get, nationwide, you got hundreds and hundreds of people going for it, and they just are told no, and then the police don't follow up, or the federal government doesn't follow up. It's really not deterring anybody. If they just told no, then they go down and get one down the street instead.
I think if people were ever in that position, I think that they would probably have a different perspective on it. I mean, did you see the undercover video I think Live Action did where they went to different journalists' home and said, "Can we put this sign in your front yard that says that you're not a gun owner?" the people that don't want that want to pass more regulations, and they all kept saying, "No, we don't want that in their front. We don't want that in our front yard." And of course you don't, because you realize that if you advertise that, you could be letting the public know that you cannot defend yourself.
Well, unless you put out a couple dog bowls,
Well, there you go.
right next to the sign.
And I'm assuming. I don't know what scared them off. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what's interesting? Jen Coffey, when she was on, she had
Same.
kind of a similar, experience.
Have you heard listen to Jen?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it was almost the same scenario,
Yeah.
except the cops did come, scared them off, and then they were really pissed. And then they came back, and they were banging on the door, and
wow.
I'm going to get you. You
Oh.
called the cops, and then the cops took forever to get back.
Yeah. Yeah. See,
So-
I think that.
But
that's,
she did have a gun. But she had her husband is Keith, a really nice guy. I tried to get him on the show with her, but he's kind of shy, I guess, or something. But anyway, he had a gun in the house that she had been trying to get him to get rid of.
Oh wow.
She had a change of heart.
A change of heart.
Yes.
Overnight with me.
Yeah,
Overnight.
it was very quick with her too.
Yep.
She had when it came to defending her child,
Yes.
and the only thing between
Yes.
these sickos and her was this firearm. It
Right.
became very real how important.
Yep.
But the thing is when we talk about the Second Amendment, we always got to keep in mind that personal safety is only part of the answer. The primary, or to me, the primary purpose is the need to maintain the balance of power in the hands of the people and not the government. I mean, because that's one of the things that really disturbed me about the Boston, and I'm probably too right-wing, but
What? I had to. I was holding back a sneeze. I'm sorry.
all right. No, sorry, I thought you were. Was if you looked at the pictures of the Boston cops going down the streets in these military vehicles and in M16s and stuff like that, pointed in all these different directions, that looked more like a police state than a police action. Police.
I've actually been hearing that from a lot of people. I will say though, in their defense, if they hadn't gone as far as they did and the guy had gotten away, then everyone would be saying, "Oh, why didn't they do more? Why didn't they put the place on lockdown?"
I get it.
It's kind of a no-win situation for them, really.
Yeah,
I think so.
Well, I understand that, and I understand that the dilemma, but I think we're too quickly willing to concede too much liberty just to feel safe. I mean, and that's part of the gun debate. The liberals believe that the police will be there. Like in your case, you saw it firsthand. Well, they might want to be there, but they can't be everywhere, and they can't be there quick enough.
Right.
Well, that was one. So I want to talk about that. Yeah, Kelly Ayotte did a really good job last night. I mean, I wasn't, as you know, I didn't support her in the primary, or but I think she's doing pretty good. She did really good last night, talking about the economy and stuff like that. But what else? Oh, a quick one. Those pesky people up in Monterey Beck, they're about to pass or might pass a law. I don't know where it stands. It was on Breitbart today that in the case of an emergency, they didn't define what emergency was. It could be that there's no toilet paper in the men's room.
Well, that is an emergency.
It is an emergency
and,
if you're
and
in the
an
men's
awkward
room.
one at that.
Exactly.
Yes.
That the banks can convert their liabilities, or basically convert their liabilities to assets in an emergency. I think it's put it on Facebook. I don't know exactly. You don't have to look, but basically what that means is if you put $50,000 in the bank, that's a liability.
Yeah.
So they just convert that to an asset. In other words, they don't have to pay you back, and then they're safe.
Well, the banks don't have enough power already.
I know. That's what it's all about, because they're in bad shape.
They're too big to fail,
They're too big to fail. But that's actually what they're considering in Monterey Beck right now.
Yeah.
You can see the link to it on Breitbart. It's pretty scary stuff, because if people lose confidence in the banks altogether.
Well, that's part of what triggered the Great Depression, the run on the banks, and
yes,
that's scary stuff.
Yeah, them pesky people in Monterey Beck. Anyway, so I thought that was pretty interesting. But anyway, we have Anne Marie here tonight to talk about edumacation.
Is that how they say it in Ohio?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Probably.
And obviously, it's something I know nothing about. But so. First of all, how did you get involved in this? Why did you get just as a mother?
Can I go back to Ohio?
Well, no, we need you here.
We need you here tonight.
We're here for the hour.
Can I take the story back to Ohio?
Oh, yes,
because
Sorry.
When that son got out of the crib and was getting ready to enter school, I thought at that time I should probably start looking at what would be a good school for him. So I began researching education back then. really for my own personal reasons, just to kind of get my kids through the system and do as best I can. And we tend to move, and so I wanted to make sure if we move from one state to another, that I wasn't running into any real issues. So I began researching education back then for my own kids, and have done that for.
Are you
for
like
years
on
and
the
years.
witness protection plan or something like that? That's
No,
why you move?
just a good mom.
Okay.
Oh, for moving?
Yeah.
No, my husband gets transferred every once in a while.
That's exactly what someone on the witness
would say
protection
that.
program would say.
Exactly.
Yes. But that no.
Well, maybe I'm
people
part of
leave
it and
you.
don't know it.
What?
Maybe I'm part of it and don't know it.
You could
I
be,
don't
you
know.
could be.
Maybe there's.
Right,
I don't think so, though. So,
Okay, anyway, sorry.
So yeah, so I just started researching education for my own personal benefit, and when we moved here, I've been up here about almost 10 years now. I got to know some people and associated with Cornerstone, and they said, maybe you can take your knowledge and use it in Concord. Look at the legislation, if they're passing legislation on education. And I thought, why not? I mean, I share it with a lot of parents. I've got a lot of parents that, I give information to help them also, because I figure might as well share the wealth. And so, yeah, I started doing that for Cornerstone a couple years ago. And so I'll go through the education bills and kind of look at them, see what ones I'm going to focus on. I don't have time to do all of them. There's so many, and a lot of them I'm not familiar with. So I'll focus on the ones I'm pretty familiar with.
Right.
And, some go up in there and weigh in on whether I support it or don't support it. And that's basically what I do. So just kind of offer that kind of guidance to the legislators that are voting on things, guidance to parents. It's interesting because in Concord you have the head of the teachers union who lobbies. You have the head of the school board.
Now, is she head of the teachers? The lobbyists all have to wear an orange badge.
Yes.
Except them.
Oh, I think they do.
They do?
I think so, yeah.
Because I know that if it's a state employee and they come to lobby, they don't have to wear an orange badge.
Yeah, I don't wear one either because I do this all volunteer. I don't get paid anything. I'm just passionate about it. I'm interested in the subject, and I just feel like I'm going to, share it and do what I
Okay.
can. But so they have a lobbyist. The School Boards Association has a lobbyist. So there's actually a lobbyist that goes out on behalf of the school boards, paid for by taxpayers, by the way. And same with this, the administrators. They have a lobbyist too, paid for by taxpayers. The teachers pay for their own, through their dues. But the School Boards Association and the administrators have a lobbyist. And I kind of looked and thought, where's the voice of the parent? Where's
Right.
the voice of the parent in here? And not that I certainly speak for every parent, because I'm sure I don't. But I kind of thought, let's give a little bit, or try to give a parent's perspective on some of these things, because parents have really lost their voice in education. So that's kind of why I got involved with Cornerstone for the
Okay.
most part.
Now, you're on tonight to talk about Common Core.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Common Core started back, I think, in the 90s. And when was it? Did it change to No Child Left Behind? It keeps morphing. They keep changing the name.
Changing the names.
Rebranding.
They
Yes.
rebrand it.
Yep.
Do they do that in other areas besides education? Because they really do that a lot in education.
They do that in a lot of stuff. I know in the psychiatric fields, they change the name of diseases all the time.
They do it in education. And it's what's funny is you'll implement something in a school or school wide or even a statewide, and it'll be a disaster, and then they'll reform it again. Same thing,
Right.
change the name,
Right.
and nobody knows. So that's one of the reasons why I got involved, because I can see, I could look back in history and see that we've tried this. We've tried this, and they changed the name, and I don't think things are going to change just because we changed the name on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Common Core is a new name, but you're probably No Child Left Behind, Goals 2000.
Goals
Those-
2000,
yeah,
that was
yeah,
it. That was the
yeah.
one in the 90s. Goals 2000.
What about
And-
Race to the Top? Is that
That's
part
part
of
of
that?
That's
or is
part
that-
of Common Core. It's actually
Okay.
the money to bribe the states to sign on to Common Core.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
money that Bill Gates and the Department of Education, you look at the deficit, you're looking at a deficit, this is where a lot of the money's going from Race to the Top. Race to the Top said, here, states will give you money, but you have to sign on to Common Core, and you have to, do these other strings, because, of course, it always comes with strings attached. So New Hampshire signed on to Common Core to get Race to the Top funds. Now, I'm not aware of us receiving any funds since this has happened. So we've kind of done it, I guess out of the goodness of our own heart. But this is all now going to be passed on to the taxpayer. Everything, all the costs that are involved, and it's extremely costly. But I wish I could give you a figure on what it's going to cost the state and what it's going to cost taxpayers. I've gone before the New Hampshire School Board asking them for a figure. People have asked the commissioner, and we've never gotten a straight answer. We've never really gotten an answer that this. I mean, obviously they're not going to be able to pinpoint an exact number, but other states have come up with estimates. I'm not sure why the Department of Education will not at least give us a good estimate on what this is costing.
Right.
But it's going to cost a chunk of change for everybody.
Well, the other thing too is, and this is not unique to this particular subject matter, is what typically happens is the federal government says, we need you to implement this program. We will give you X number of dollars if you implement this program. So the bureau heads, or I think it was the case in Real ID, were promised this money, and they jump at this. Excuse me. It's almost like grant money that they got to grab to help their budget, and the way it works is they give you X number of millions of dollars for something. You get it started, and the problem that people probably don't understand is that any time the federal government makes a deal with the state, with the city, with the town, with you, that's only good for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Okay? Each legislature is technically a completely different entity, and each legislature is not bound by what the previous legislature did. Because somebody called me up, I think it was a state employee, asked me, well, how can they change our retirement? We already agreed to this. And I had to explain to him it's because every 2 years the legislatures are new. It's any agreement you had with the legislature is null and void at this point, and they can change it. So what happens on things like this, if it's Common Core, whatever project the federal government wants to entice you to work on, they can pull the funding in the next 2 years.
Well, and
they're not obligated.
We didn't get any funding. We didn't even get any funding.
It's like the special ed funding. I don't remember how much we were supposed to get to implement special ed stuff, but we're not even close to where they promised when they initiated it 20, 30 years ago.
And the other problem on top of that is now if a school or the state turns it down, well, guess what? They're going to lose the title money. So now it's like not only do we not get any money to implement it, now they're going to start saying, they're going to be coercive and say, now we're not going to supply you money for your title funding if you don't carry forward with this. So, parents might say,
what's title funding? I don't even know.
Title I or Title II, it's for maybe a child needs extra help, so they'll hire a Title I teacher that'll sit down with a child to offer them extra help.
Right.
So, the schools are looking at this going, they're going to cut that kind of funding. And so if parents like, I don't like this Common Core, now the school's going, well, we don't want our funding cut. So where's that parent's voice again? How can parents say we don't want this? I mean, some states have not signed on to this, and some states are actually fighting back now because the standards that they put forth, right now we have English and math, and they're not even world-class standards. Interestingly enough, they call them internationally benchmark standards at one point. They've withdrawn that term because people started questioning them and said, what internationally benchmark standards are these? Because these do not measure up to the top-performing countries. And you can see that by the experts that were on the review committee that refused to sign off on them. So from an academic point of view, this is not going to do anything stellar that's going to make these kids be able to compete on an international basis if they follow the standards. They're actually going to keep them behind their international peers. So that's one of the big problems with this. Manchester, you're in Manchester, so I know that there's been some parents that have raised concerns about this, and on May 28th at 7 o'clock at City Hall, they're going to have a meeting. And I've been invited to go and speak. and they're going to talk about this, and I would encourage your viewers to get to that meeting and start researching this. There's a Facebook page that's set up. It's called Stop Common Core in New Hampshire. Join that Facebook page and watch, because the material that's being posted on there is really, really good. And it is critical of Common Core. You know, you can find good and bad and everything, so I'm sure you can find some good in it. But in my opinion, the bad, well, first of all, I'm a 10th Amendment person. I'm not sure why the federal government's involved in this anyway. You know,
Right.
This is
Well, that-
really a state issue, again.
I was explaining to you before the show that I really don't know a lot about Common Core, because it doesn't matter which way you slice this, I'm against the federal government encroaching on
Right.
states' rights or states' anything. So therefore, the federal government, I mean, the federal government is its only purpose is to facilitate things that can't be done by the state. And education is easily something the state can do by itself. It doesn't need the federal government.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the state of New Hampshire, it is equivalent to probably many of the European countries that run their own education system.
Yeah.
There's no need for the federal government to. The only purpose I could see the federal government having in education at all is to share information between the states so they know what's going on in other states. But other than that,
It
they
just
don't-
adds more bureaucracy.
That's
It
all
does.
does.
It's
The whole
another
thing, yeah.
layer, and they're really starting to control things from. Well, they have been. I mean, you know, since the establishment of the Department of Education. If you look at like international scores, we have. I mean, it's been level. There's been no improvement in education, but the funding has skyrocketed. So, you know, I always ask people who say, you know, we just need more funding. Well, look at the scores and look at the amount of funding that, you know, because I'm not opposed to saying, you know, we need to spend money. You know, I look at Manchester's math program in their school, and I've tutored math in the past. It's one of the worst ones you're going to find in the country. It's everyday math. It's horrible. As a math tutor,
really?
all you do is you force kids into tutoring because it's not a good math program. It's fuzzy math. So, you know, if you're talking about spending money to replace that program, that would probably be a wise investment. The problem is who's accountable for choosing that program to begin with? You know, where's the accountability for whoever made that decision?
Yeah.
So I'm not but if you're just going to throw money at the system, which is basically what we've been doing. I mean, every time they try to reform, they always miss the things that need to be reformed, which is the programs and the textbooks that these teachers are forced to use. I can tell you there's a lot of teachers that are not happy about that program in your schools, but they're told this is what you have to use. This is what you're going to have to use, knowing that this is not going to help these kids. I know a Title I teacher in Manchester. She's getting all these kids, you know, that can't do math because they're using everyday math. I'm not surprised that she's very busy with the kids in Manchester because it's interesting because her husband was a mathematician and she homeschooled her kids, and she's like, oh, you know, this is terrible. And yeah, so she can see the problems with it, but you know what? You're going to pay her. You're going to pay her through your taxes, because instead of actually targeting the problems in the school, we're completely ignoring them and doing all this reform effort, all these costly things, and
Well,
not getting to the root of the problem.
It seems like on the state level, ever since I've been up there, every 2 years there's a new effort to have a new test to try to critique the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Common Core is just another set of tests.
It is. It's somebody said this is No Child Left Behind on steroids. And if you think we're going to get away from this testing mentality, we're not. It's only going to get worse. And part of Common Core, part of the strings attached, was to have the teachers evaluated based on what the students do on a test. Now, keep in mind, that student coming into that classroom, that teacher has to use everyday math, knowing it's a setup for failure.
Yeah, it's almost like it's rigged. Like
And
it's
so
rigged
now,
against you,
so now that teacher's going to be evaluated based on those test scores.
Yeah.
It's a rigged system, and that's a lot of teachers are very concerned. That's why you see, you know, teachers in Chicago that went on strike recently. This was one of their big contentions.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So it's interesting that you know, I wanted to explain that because I think that there's this automatic sometimes. You know, pushback against teachers' unions. And I can tell you they're right on this. They're right on this issue. Now, we may not see eye to eye exactly, but they're right on this issue. It depends. If a teacher had complete autonomy in his classroom, fine. If they're going to, hey, I've got this textbook, I know math, and I'm going to teach this kid, and you're going to see results, fine. And I'm not opposed to evaluating a teacher,
right.
But I think we need to be realistic about how we're evaluating them, and that's one of the strings attached to Race to the Top and Common Core, is to tie that evaluation to the teacher. So that's going to be part of their evaluation now. And, I know a lot of teachers that will not speak publicly, because a lot of times if they do, they become a target for the administrators.
Yeah, I've actually talked to teachers on the side.
Yes.
And they're upset about a lot of stuff that's going on in school,
right.
but they're not
right.
at liberty to talk about it.
I keep teachers in confidentiality. There's teachers that I consult with. Yes, I do this on behalf of parents, but I can't ignore the teachers. I have to listen to their perspective. I have to listen to them, because they're on the front line. And I'm seeing good teachers put in this position, wanting, they go into this for the love of teaching, and then they're put in this position where they know. I had a teacher in Hooksett who said that she was going to teach at a different grade level, a lower grade level, because she wanted to do as little damage as possible.
Wow.
Yes. Because everyday math was in Hooksett. So, that's the reality. That's the reality that the teachers face. That's the reality that your kids face. And parents, I've seen them, kind of collaborate and make positive changes, but they have to get up. They have to start going to school board meetings. They have to start demanding better. They did in Hollis. Hollis got rid of everyday math a few years ago because they had some parents who said, we've had enough. We've had enough of this. I haven't seen where that program's going to be changed based on Common Core. And they're going to use it they're still using it in Bedford, but I think, you see higher scores in Bedford. Guess why? They're all in tutors. They're all in tutoring. Yeah. I mean, I have parents contacting me all the time. Where can I find a math tutor in Bedford? They can afford it.
Yeah, well, there's another variable, too. If you looked at one of the high school, if you looked at when I first ran, you could look at there was 3 high schools in Manchester at the time, right? Or still is?
Manchester, there's West, Central, and what's the main one? Memorial.
Right.
Yeah.
And the same amount of money was being spent for each individual student, but the test scores in each school was vastly different. And the one that was associated with Bedford at the time was really high. And I don't think it was a function of affluence. I really think it's a function of parents. In the Bedford
let
community...
Let me add to that, because there's back when I first moved to Bedford, they were using a good math textbook back then, and those kids were going on to West High School, so they were getting a quality math education in the lower grades.
Okay.
And then they went on to high school, so that could certainly be skewing, the grades. They have switched over.
We have a call, yeah.
Oh,
should we grab this?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe someone from Ohio. Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's on the line? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? You're on live television. Your time to shine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually watching this Rock and Paper Hand Grenades. Is that what the store is?
Rock, paper, hand grenades, yes.
Huh?
Yes, rock, paper, hand grenades, sir, yes.
Yeah, and I'm kind of interested in it because I've been listening to them talk about Kelly Ayotte, and she voted against background checks.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about how the schools don't do a good job testing teachers and, testing students. And where is Kelly Ayotte and all of this, and all our congressmen having a destination city in Manchester, and she's more worried about Benghazi and hanging on to McCain's coattails. And, and it's ludicrous. Listening to these guys is ludicrous. I don't understand what are they talking about.
Actually,
I mean, and I never saw the show before. I'm just saying.
yeah.
I mean, what's in their mind? What is in their minds talking about all of this stuff?
Okay, you want to answer? Or?
Yeah, I want an answer. Yeah,
All right.
what is their issue? I mean,
Well, first,
don't you think our congressional delegation should be as concerned about as they think we should be listening to them about our schools as we are about Benghazi? Shouldn't Kelly Ayotte be concerned about not giving guns to people? You know, even I'm a gun owner. I want to see people have background checks at gun shows.
all right. Can I answer you? Yeah, I'm not going to let you just
Sure.
keep going on forever, buddy. You asked
Yeah,
about.
I mean, but
I know,
hello, who are these guys?
okay, I know,
I
but
mean,
you,
I don't
you,
understand it.
I get that. You asked
I
about.
never saw. I mean, my cable got screwed up today, and I only get up to 23 channels until the guy comes over here. And I turned on this show, and I'm saying, who are these people?
Okay, anyway, my name's Gary Hopper. I'm a state rep. And this is Matt
Yeah.
Connarton. That's Anne Marie Banfeld.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Okay, now
no
I'm going to try to pick this apart one at a time.
Sure.
As far as background checks, right now there's already background checks. What the federal government wanted to do was make it illegal for me to pass down a handgun or rifle to my grandchildren.
I gotta hang up on
Yeah.
him because he just swore twice.
You just swore twice. You're off. Anyway, that is not bull stuff.
Bullpucky.
Bullpucky. That is not bullpucky. The fact of the matter is, if that bill went through, it would have been illegal to pass down a gun to my son without going through the federal government's approval process. Currently in New Hampshire, there is already no gun show loophole as far as handguns are concerned. It is illegal to sell a handgun to somebody you don't know in New Hampshire. That's as far as that goes. The other thing about that was that the background check had no influence whatsoever, or would never have had any influence on the kid in Connecticut who killed those kids.
Yeah, would have prevented that.
Because there was no background check relevant to that, because he got the gun, killed his mother, and took the guns. And B, the fact is the guy is pretty sure he was pretty willing to break the law in the fact that he shot little children.
Yes.
I think that's still a law against the law in Connecticut.
Yeah, I think pretty much
Right?
everywhere except Ohio.
Except Ohio, right. Except Ohio, that's still illegal. So obviously the law was pretty irrelevant to the guy. As far as Kelly Ayotte and Benghazi, Kelly Ayotte has been following up on Benghazi because, as far as we know, I've never got any answers as to what happened in Benghazi. The White House has been stonewalling any kind of attempts to try to get information. There are many witnesses that were in Benghazi at the time, and none of them have been interviewed. There was 28 people that were saved. Those haven't been interviewed. There are still huge lapses in security that were unexplained, and there was, 2 dead special ops guys and an ambassador killed in Benghazi, and there's still no answers. So her following up on that is perfectly reasonable for a United States senator to do so. As far as, what was the other one about? He had like 4.
Was it only 4? God,
Yeah.
it seemed like
Yeah, it went on for a while.
it seemed like there were 7 or 8, and then
What was
he
the other
started
one he was
cursing.
asking? Do you remember what was the other one he was asking?
Was it education related?
Yeah, why isn't she focused on education? Actually, she was. If you were at her
Yep.
town hall meeting, she did focus on education. She focused on the budget. Just because a senator is known for talking about Benghazi does not mean she can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
I mean, I'm a state legislator. There's up to 2 topics that I'm familiar with.
Right, you can walk and chew gum.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you pat your head and rub your tummy, though?
like if if it has to do with like guns and prostitution, I'm there.
Yes.
Anything
that should
like-
be your campaign slogan.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, that's as far as education. That's why we have guests like Anne Marie Banfeld on, because
Yes.
she actually knows what she's talking about.
Actually, if you were to ever run for office in Nevada, the guns and prostitution thing would probably actually work really
Probably
well for
overdone
you.
in Nevada.
Well, maybe.
You know,
Yeah,
probably
that's
everybody runs on that.
That's true. You don't want to be one of the pack.
Right.
Yeah, never
Exactly.
mind.
Anyway, so we answered those questions.
There you go.
So anyway, before we run out of time, one of the things that's been disturbing, and I don't know how much of this is truth or hype or what, was that under Common Core, the quantity of information the federal government is keeping on your children is almost bizarre.
Really?
Oh, yes.
That's interesting.
Oh, yes. This has totally changed the landscape on data mining and data information that is going to be going out on your children in any public school pre-K. This goes from preschool through college. And this is now starting to become
They
more
wouldn't
and more
share
revealed.
that with their friends at like Google and stuff.
Oh,
though.
you could go to third parties. It could go to other government agencies. It could go wherever it wants to go now.
I like third parties.
Yeah. I like any party.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
So my advice to parents, number one, is to check your child's record, make sure that it's accurate. The worst thing you want is something going. And if you follow me on Facebook, you know that a lot of times, how about the kid who was punished for making the Pop-Tart gun? Okay,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that is now in the
yeah,
file.
but that kid should have been put in jail.
Well,
You shouldn't be shooting with your Pop-Tarts.
or at the very least, a rap on the
Wrist,
knuckles with a ruler.
yes.
You know.
So
Exactly.
you can see how absurd sometimes these things are, and that gets put. I mean, it's
Yeah,
handled.
but the thing is, in that case, all seriousness, all kidding aside, the Pop-Tart gun is a good example because on his record, it won't say made a Pop-Tart into a gun and kidded around with another kid, because that would look ridiculous on the record. What it will go on is showed inappropriate behavior and used devices in a threatening, whatever it is.
Right.
So that 10 years down the line, he won't even remember he made a Pop-Tart
Right.
gun.
That's right.
And it'll be on his record, and
Yes.
they're gonna look at him and say, well, I don't know if he's, we can't put him into service here.
Right.
Maybe he needs to go in the military if he's antisocial or something,
There you go. And so this is one of the big concerns coming out right now is what information are they gathering? Religious affiliation, political affiliation, things that are not academic related, and where's it going? Who's it going to? Now it can be shared with the Department of Labor. So when these kids graduate and go to get a job, and you have the Pop-Tart gun kid going to get a job, and you have, maybe an anti-gun person who's concerned that this Pop-Tart kid is going to be a threat to the, I mean, I'm drawing conclusions, but as you can see how absurd that instance was,
Yeah.
where it could be down the road, it could be a real problem, because if you have grown adults making the news because they're concerned about a kid making a gun out of a Pop-Tart and how absurd that is, what does this mean down the road? So
Okay,
right
wait.
now that's a concern.
Want to take that one?
Yes. Oh, he's
No,
saying
no,
do
do
not
not
take
take Pop.
Oh.
It's probably our friend with the potty mouth calling back, is what it is. He wants to swear some more.
Yeah, the cussologist.
Ugh,
Yeah.
I hate that.
I make up my own words.
Cussologist?
Yeah.
That's good.
It is
That's
good,
That's a
right?
good word,
That
yeah.
is a good word.
Yep.
You can use that. Anyway, so yeah, the idea of collecting information on children and then using
Yes.
that to someone told me, from what I understand, is that eventually the process. This is why Bill Gates and those people have so much money invested in this, is so that they, instead of children, if I forgot the Constitution today. I hoped I tried to remember to bring it, and it talks about the purpose of education. And the purpose of education was never intended to be so that you could train kids so that they could become machinists or engineers or this
That's
or that.
right.
That's
That's how they do it in
Not
China.
yeah, that's what they do in China. Exactly. That should give you a clue right there.
Exactly.
We're supposed to be bringing up good citizens.
That's right.
And if they learn math and science as a byproduct of that to go on to a career, that's secondary, not primary. And we're changing this Common Core is changing the entire landscape so that what they become and who they can work for as they get older
That's right.
is primary.
Yes, you hit on the core of Common Core. I had a parent, or I talked to a lady the other day whose neighbor, they gave her son a survey, because this is what they're going to do. They're going to survey the kids. Where should you go? Let's see, where does the state think you should go? So they're surveying these kids, and he came up as a rapper. He's going to be a rapper. The mother is furious. This was in Nashua. My own kids have changed their minds. They're in college now. I still have one in college that hasn't picked a major yet.
Right.
I have one that entered nursing school, and she had no plans to enter nursing school when she was a sophomore in high school. So these are things that, that the state is now going to start guiding these children on these tracks. And, where is your child going to land? Are they going to land in the college track, or are they going to land in the workforce track?
Right.
And so now they're incorporating all these workforce skills through competencies and things like that. Now the teachers, instead of focusing on their content, their academic content, they're focusing on, making them tolerant and, self-aware and, all these kind of soft skills. And some of them may be very valuable. But some of them, if you're
going to be a therapist,
or if you're if you're graduating,
or if you're going to be Chinese,
right?
There you go.
Yes, if you're going to be Chinese,
the focus should be on literacy, number one. But you're right; you brought it back to civilian. Going on to be good.
Well, don't claim that I brought anything back to civility.
Well,
there's no way. Right?
Civics
right?
education.
Yes.
Civics education.
Okay.
You're right. Maintaining the republic and making sure that we don't repeat mistakes in history that history has shown us.
Right.
So you're right. That was the purpose of education. And to create literate citizens. Not so the state can say, well, you know what, here's where we think the jobs might be, and, let's kind of track some of these kids to these jobs. And, if you have a parent out there who's not very involved or maybe just not paying close attention, where are those kids going to be tracked to?
You know what's funny is I saw this on Facebook the other day. It was really, really good. It was it's funny how liberals think that the Constitution was absolute when it came to the First Amendment, because they believe that texting and cell phones and other stuff are all protected under the First Amendment. But when it comes to the Second Amendment, that it's antiquated and it could not possibly apply in this time frame.
We're getting bipartisan support against this.
Anyway, what I was trying to get to is the fact that the Constitution is so current and is so accurate. It's the Sixth Amendment of the New Hampshire Constitution that refers to the necessity to piety and morality being necessary for a good society, and it's absolutely necessary to have good moral teachers to teach our children about the importance of society and morality and everything else. And that was the primary purpose of education. And everything else is secondary. Math and science are cool. And so it's another example of how we've ignored history or ignored our Constitution at our own detriment if we're going to become like China and just program this child to be a line worker for the next 20 years.
Right.
And what do they have in China? They have those I don't know if they still have. I think they put nets up to keep the kids from jumping off.
Oh.
Do you ever see that?
Oh yeah, because they commit suicide.
Yeah, they put these in these factories.
Hopeless existence.
They're locked in these factories, which on the outset look better than working at the farm and starving to death. So they go to these factories so they don't starve to death, and the working conditions are so regimented and so strict that they had to put nets near the balconies because people were just leaping to their death.
Well, interesting enough, somebody
and if that's what we want for our children, I think
somebody brought up the fact that they collect all this information on their students, and it's put into, I think it's a Dagan, or there's some kind of dossier that they put this information in on their students, and so they've drawn that correlation to what we're now starting to do with our students. We're going to gather all this information and put it into a file, and start surveying these kids. Parents, I don't think the surveys are mandatory. Start saying no. Tell your kids don't take any of the surveys at schools. There's a backlash against these assessments, the Common Core assessments now. Parents all over the country are saying no. We're not going to let our kids, because first of all, they're not just assessing your academic knowledge; they're assessing your attitudes, values, and behaviors. So that's how this information gets sent out. So a lot of parents are saying, you know what, my kid's not sitting for that exam. They're not sitting for that assessment. I'm hearing from teachers all across the country that parents you can find it on the internet where parents have said no. They're rising up and saying no more. I'm not opposed to testing. I don't think any parent's opposed to testing. You want to be able to see where your child is.
Yeah, you want to have some sort of barometer.
But this should be on academics, not on do I have the right global warming attitude.
Do you?
To some, maybe yes. To some, maybe no.
Well played, ma'am. Well
Thank you.
played.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for
Yes.
that.
We're at 2 minutes.
Yes.
Oh, there was three things you wanted to make sure you covered.
The cost of this, which is,
Huge.
again, we need to start asking the DOE for some cost estimates. Look in your budgets, your school budgets. The academics, which, if you're looking for any kind of critiques on the academic part of these standards, you would want to look under Sandra Stotsky, who sat on the English Validation Committee, wrote a critique that this is not going to prepare your kids for college, this is not good. And James Milgram, Professor James Milgram, a mathematician, who said, the longer you stay in a public school under Common Core, further behind your kids are going to go, fall compared to their international peers. So the academics. And then the privacy issue. So yes, those I think are the three main areas of contention. There are many more, but those are probably the big areas that...
Now, I don't know if it was Common Core, but I was talking to one of my grandkids who goes to a school in Manchester, and he was being told in school, he said something, he made a comment, says, what? And it was a comment about how, fundamentally, how horrible the white race is. And I don't know if this is part of Common Core or some other weird crap.
Not that I know of. There's something called white privilege that I've seen a lot in the news lately,
Right.
where their kids are learning about, you're privileged, I guess, if you're white or something. And I haven't really looked at that, but I don't think that is coming through Common Core.
Okay, because it was, I had to explain to him that, first of all, there is no race that is above enslaving or destroying another. If you look at Asia, I met a guy from Laos who thought all Chinese were stupid. I know that the Japanese have had a distrust of the Chinese. The Chinese distrust of the slaves that came to the United States were actually sold to the white people from black people because they were in different tribes. Man's inhumanity to man, it crosses all race barriers.
Yes, it does.
Evil is evil regardless of which race does it to which race. I mean, I remember one of my first year as a legislator at the Fish and Game Committee, a guy came in, and he was a Mohawk Indian talking about how his people controlled from the Gulf Coast to the Hudson Bay and all this stuff, land greater than that of the Roman Empire. And I'm thinking, and this comes to me, this is not politically correct, but it came to me and says, why is it if Indians kill each other, it's somehow superior to when white people kill Indians? It's the same thing. It's just different. If you almost have to be racist to believe there's a difference.
Well, I think it's
right.
You certainly should be looking closely at what your kids are learning in school and make sure that that it's logical, that it's academic, and that it's not more about social engineering than it is literacy.
Right.
It's hard for me to comment on something I haven't seen. But
it doesn't stop me.
Yeah.
It never does.
Yeah. I mean, and you get the information from a child, you don't know how much of
jaded it is.
Yeah, so I would say to a parent to ask to see the material, and if you have a problem with it, take it to the school board. I think the school board needs to.
I mean, because you look at our own history. The way we treated people of color was horrible. Okay, there's no question there. But the way we treated the Irish when they came over was not all that pleasant either. I mean, they were treated like peasants. It's a horrible part about human nature, and to put a race envelope on it is just ridiculous. Look, what was it? Tutsis killed off, or the Tutsis got killed off?
I like Tootsie Rolls.
No, in Africa.
Right.
It was horrible what the genocide they did to each other. I mean, it's got nothing to do with race. Hatred is
hate is hate. Yeah.
Hate is hate.
We gotta
we
go.
gotta go. I'll see you next week. I've got your accomplice on from Cornerstone Policy Research next week.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ann. You were wonderful.
Thank
Thank you.